purpose of the Fireside chat today is to provide investors with an update on Flora Growth's business developments with a particular focus on its international cannabis strategy and recent announcements. The views, information, or opinions expressed by our potential future partners are solely those of the individual presenters and do not necessarily represent the views of Flora and/or its directors, officers, or employees. Flora is not responsible for and has not in all cases verified for accuracy any of the information to be provided by our partners on this call. During this call, we may make statements that contain forward-looking information within the meaning of applicable security legislation. Forward-looking information may include, but is not limited to, statements with respect to Flora's financial performance, growth in revenue and earnings, and business prospects and opportunities, particularly as they relate to any of the recent announcements made or Flora Growth's international cannabis strategy. Forward-looking information is subject to known and unknown risks, uncertainties, and other factors that may cause actual results to be materially different from the conclusions, forecasts, or projections expressed or implied by such forward-looking information. Certain material factors and assumptions have been applied in drawing the conclusions or making forecasts or projections reflected in such forward-looking information. As a description of the factors that could affect and the assumptions underlying the company's forward-looking information can be found in Flora's public disclosure documents that are available for review under Flora's EDGAR profile on the SEC website. Participants should not place undue reliance on forward-looking information. Flora does not undertake to update any forward-looking information except in accordance with applicable securities laws. Luis, I'll hand it over to you now.
Thank you, Evan, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and frankly, personally, it's a pleasure and an honor to be joined by senior members of my executive team. Today, in our Fireside chat, we have Dr. Annabelle Manalo Morgan, our Chief Scientific Advisor for our company, and then Jason Warnock, our Chief Revenue Officer for the organization. Welcome, Dr. Annabelle. Welcome, Jason.
Good to be here.
Hi, good to be here.
Well, it's great to have you both, and I think it would be the most appropriate thing to do to allow you to introduce yourself to our investors. So why don't we start with you, Jason?
Thanks, Luis. So as you said, my name is Jason Warnock. I have worked in the cannabis industry for a number of years, for about 5 or 6 years now, going back, primarily on the international side. I used to be specialized specifically on the logistics and international regulatory and supply chain factors within the cannabis industry. So I spent a lot of time looking at international markets and regulatory moving forward on many cannabis opportunities from a global footprint standpoint. My background before that, though, was 15 years in the communications, technology, and startup space. I was very fortunate to work with a number of companies from Google and Walt Disney and some of the largest banking institutions in really framing both strategic and experience conditions from a sustainability standpoint, as well as a technology standpoint. So very excited to be in the cannabis space. I think if you would have told me 6 years ago that I would be specialized in international cannabis, I would have kind of laughed. But it's an interesting world we live in and how these things have progressed. It's a very exciting time to be in part of this, and especially in Flora. I'm really excited to talk about the amazing things we have on the international stage and where we are from a consumer product standpoint.
Absolutely, Jason. And once again, I think our investors are going to be very excited to hear about our international expansion strategy, the advancements on the Cosechemos cultivation and extraction facility, as well as our CPG portfolio. So lots to unpack today, but why don't we go to Dr. Annabelle for some introductions.
Thank you, Luis. So my name is Dr. Annabelle Manalo Morgan. Please call me Dr. Annabelle for short. And I think alongside with Jason, it's safe to say 5, 6 years ago, I didn't think I'd be in the cannabis industry either. So my background is in neuroscience from Georgetown University and cell and development biology with a specialization in cardio-oncology from Vanderbilt University here in Nashville, Tennessee. That's where I'm primarily based. I was working very heavily with both the government and academia institutions on cardio-oncology, which basically means looking at the offset effects on chemotherapies and how they're cardiotoxic, of course. So I was working on that for 7 years or so, and I entered into the cannabis space because I had a surprise in my life where my third born child ended up having 200 seizures a day. He had a stroke at birth. And we were in ICU from the day of birth all the way till about 5 weeks, where they ended up removing 40% of his brain. So they removed 40% of left brain. And of course, what's the outcome of that, right? As a 2-month-old baby, you just pray that your kid will have some kind of quality of life. And I was prepared for that. I guess being a developmental neuroscientist, I understood the importance of that part of the brain. And so I was obviously worried, but I know that the developing brain is very neuroplastic. So I had a lot of hope. My child turned 5 months, 6 months old, and he was still no different than a newborn baby. And that's when I started just kind of researching and going outside of the box of what really comes across our desk, which cannabis never does, right? But I was desperate, and I looked into cannabis, and I started looking at the molecular data. Of course, there wasn't a lot, but I started putting pieces together, and I decided to take the chance and formulate my son a cannabinoid formulation, and didn't tell anybody but my husband, and started delivering this substance to my son, and started seeing results within 2 days, where his eye, so he's missing left brain, so his right eye, we would never even see it. And that eye came into view. 2 months later, he started crawling. He's supposed to be paralyzed on the right side of his body. At 14 months, he started walking. Today he's 5 and he has no developmental deficits. He's right on time to enter into kindergarten, and he's still missing 40% of his brain. So obviously extremely passionate and motivated. And as a scientist, I'm not able to really tell you the mechanism as to how that occurred. So that's my goal now. My goal is to really nail down on the science of all these beautiful anecdotal stories that we hear about. I started consulting for countries, did a lot of work in Israel, and I've also done a lot of publicity on my son's story. But it's important for me that when I speak to my colleagues, I'm also introducing substance. So my focus is obviously getting the science done, getting the clinical studies done. And here I am today with Flora because I truly believe that, they have that mission. I mean, science takes time, medicine takes time. And in such a booming industry, it's hard to have the patience to want to do the science, but that's definitely the gap in my opinion in the industry. So that's why I'm here.
Dr. Annabelle is such an inspiring story. Just the fact that you have the opportunity to share it with the world and highlight what is a miracle, the miracle that happened with your son. There's no other way into describing it. I would want to start asking you a couple of questions with regards to that experience of yours. How would you define that outcome, that miraculous outcome, replacing all of your son's medications with a cannabinoid-based product?
I think that's the $1 million question, right? And I think that as an industry, we've focused that, there's so many steps in science. There's molecular data, there's cellular data, tissue data, before we even put it into an animal. And then we go into humans, much, much later in that process. In cannabis, we're kind of going backwards, where you're hearing stories of people just having miraculous outcomes, and we don't really know how that happened. And so, that's definitely the $1 million question that I'm trying to pursue is defining, well, how did that happen to my son? So that, of course, we can start making particular or specific medicines using cannabis on specific conditions, right? So instead of just going to dispensary and saying, oh yeah, this person's got this, just give them this cannabis. There's no definition, there's no specificity in what we're really delivering today. So how do we get to that so that we can not really be separate of what medicine is, but that we can start joining in and making cannabis more, more normalized, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with your comments. And clearly there are significant scientific gaps in the cannabis industry. And obviously you joining our organization, you're helping us fill in those gaps. So tell me a little bit about your plans for the near future as you become an integrated part of the Flora story.
Well, there's so much we can do. And again, joining Flora was so easy because, you know, you and the team just understood that there are a lot of steps to getting to our eventual goal where we can make specific cannabis for specific conditions, right? And really that is what will change minds. You know, there's still a lot of people that oppose cannabis. And there's still a lot of people that are afraid to try it for an ailment or a condition, and especially for their kid. So if we can start having some data to back up the things that we see, if we can start having some data to back up products that we say, hey, this helps you with headaches. Well, how do you guys know that? Well, we've shown it in 2,000 people, right? So with Flora, you know, there's a million goals, but of course, our most immediate goals are trying to take our cannabis and figuring out how to really specify it so that we can start making products that are specific to different conditions. And that takes both clinical studies. I think we should go that route, but then we also do the molecular studies to start pinpointing the mechanisms as to how that's happening. And we're not just contributing to the world, we're contributing to science. And of course, that's something that I want to do.
Of course. And I think that leads into what's going on in the market today. The market today, Dr. Annabelle, is flooded with products, multiple strains. How can consumers feel confident in the products that they purchase? Let's talk specifically about Flora's products. How can they feel confident about the products that we are developing and selling into the market?
You know, I think it's important to say that there are a lot of good products out there, right? But and there are a lot of good people behind these products. But again, because cannabis is so popular, I think there's a rush to put products out there. And a lot of what these products are good for is kind of hypothetical because we haven't done the studies to actually prove that. The cool thing about cannabis is, although it's medical and it can be pharmaceutical grade, it's also, it also has the ability to fit in the wellness and nutraceutical space. And I really, think that as Flora, we put definition behind all that, and so that you're giving clarity to the consumer, you're giving clarity to the dispensaries that they're like, oh, hey, Flora has this strain and they've tested it in amongst these things and they've tested it amongst these people. And here are all the safety and stability studies that really are a lot easier to do than people think. It's just about implementing those protocols. So back to your question, how can consumers feel confident about it? I mean, we're going to put in the time, the effort, and the finances to make sure we're doing things right.
I completely agree. I think scientific rigor and ensuring that everything that we put out there is of the utmost quality, and then backing it with science is the key to unlocking confidence in the consumer market, but as well as the patient and the medical community as a whole. Right. And that opens the door to Jason. Jason, you've been standing there at Chief Revenue Officer. I think I'm going to start with a very simple question for you. So what are you working on? Tell me some development, some of the work that you're working on with Flora since you joined.
Excellent. And I would just kind of piggyback on Dr. Annabelle there, saying we would agree that the efficacy and the standards and the trials of our product portfolio is key to our expansion. And for us to actually succeed globally, we both need to have the ability to move into markets from a regulatory standpoint, but also the ability to move into markets from just the efficacy of the materials and the transparency of our supply chain. We have this tremendous, wonderful asset in Colombia where we can grow this amazing organic, GAP certified, and I'll go into those a little bit later, but we have this amazing product, but getting it to a situation where we can produce wellness products, where we can produce medicine, where we have the facilities to take it, and then to take that to a global stage requires rigor, testing, stability, formulation, and all the different points of the supply chain. So as a business, we're really focused on how do we connect the dots and how do we take these amazing growth assets and take them to the world in a very meaningful and ethical and actually sustainable manner. But what are we working on? Well, we're trying to take that message of what a cannabis company could be and change it a little bit. We've talked to the market a great deal about our strategic advantages of our amazing equatorial growth. But then how does that translate to the consumer? How does the consumer get that feeling of what the products we're actually producing? Could that be in a food product, like a novel food product containing CBD? Could that be in a cosmetic? Could it be in a phytotherapeutic that would be in a wellness category? There are multiple categories of which Flora touches. Our most exciting adventures, I guess, in the short term have been in the food division, the Casa Whole Foods division. Our recent announcement with the Tropi deal is enormous. For a cannabis company to enter into an agreement with the largest distributor in Colombia, that's 130,000 points of distribution within the market. While we may be entering just with a series of products that are based on wellness and whole foods, the opportunity is immense. And it's really kind of missed by the market in the sense that they don't understand consumer products are more important than what we buy and live and eat and consume and brush our teeth with every day. Understanding that there is potentially cannabinoids that could be part of that today or part of that tomorrow is a much longer story to tell. And no one wants to be thrust into a no-name generic down the road and have that experience. You want to have brands that you can trust and believe in, whether we come through a cosmetic channel with a number of our products, whether we come through a food and beverage, or eventually even just to the medicines and the therapeutics that Dr. Annabelle was talking about. We need to be with the consumer in the places they are. So I'm most excited about our food and beverage division. It is expanding rapidly and is reaching so many more people, and our ability to connect these larger logistical supply chains.
It's certainly very exciting to see the expansion of each one of the operating divisions of Flora, and how not only the consumers, but also the distributors are taking our products and are willing to open up distribution channels in a meaningful way. Can you share with our investors today a little bit about our international strategy, some of the countries that we're looking forward to penetrate, and how we're working with our Colombian team to ensure that this happens over the short term?
That's a good question. So we did make several announcements in the last few weeks. Certainly the Heimat brand deal, which is in Switzerland, that's ongoing, certainly has a connection point, and I'll get into that in a second, as well as the previously announced LOI with the Hoshi group, which is in Malta and in Portugal. So as you know, as I just described, we have this tremendous opportunity, this vast, beautiful organic product that we'll be growing in, a multitude of strains and products and so forth. But connecting those dots is more than just having someone to buy it. We need the regulatory control, we need the rigor, we need the forensic level control over our product and distribution all the way to the touch points. Having markets like Europe open to us are exciting, and certainly the product by itself is good. But we at Flora have the capacity to do 6 times the German entire market in our current capacity. So our capacity to meet these markets is immense, but our ability to translate that into products is the key to this. Just having the ability to get it to those markets is one thing. Having the ability for consumers to understand in it, believe in it, and have the brands that they trust is the next thing. So our focus from the revenue side has been on delivering this on multiple fronts, be it in our brands like My Naturals, or the just released Awe brand, or a number of new brands that we'll be releasing over the Q3 and Q4, are all living and breathing with consumers in those points, whether it be in the Americas, like North America, or into Europe, or into the UK, or even into the Asia Pacific and the Australian markets. We're bringing these products forward through our global distribution and then backing it by the connection to our immense opportunity with our production facilities.
Correct. And that brings me to something that I hear often, and is that the story behind many cannabis companies, Jason, where companies are claiming to be the largest or most extensive or have the largest production of cannabis in the world. How does Flora's strategy differ from those who have promoted these types of comments in the past?
Well, I think, the early cannabis days, there was a rush, almost a land grab. Everyone rushed out and tried to build the largest facility or made claim to the largest amount of square footage. And, unfortunately, there's the legacy to this is there's many facilities, certainly in North America and especially in Canada, where they're just empty now. They're not in production. Having the largest was never going to be the most efficient use of that space. Having the lowest cost has always been a very exciting piece of the business, but that's only one portion of the margin. Having the lowest cost production, then you have to have the lowest cost formulation and processing, and eventually distribution, and eventually brand. There's so many touch points. It's like owning a gold mine, but no ability to have a jeweler or anything else to get it to market. Just having production was never enough. So I see that a lot of the early entrants to this space were touting massive production. And then eventually it's become a cost model. And we have those as well. I mean, Flora has the great luxury of having an equatorial place that provides us an ideal growing conditions for these products. And I think the world would argue that as cannabis and the markets normalize, these kind of regions will always outperform any of the North American or other spaces. We just have to go as Flora. How do we create really the supply chain provenance of those materials and remove the stigmas that exist still in those markets, and then prove the efficacy of those products through our supply chain? So while we may have the opportunity to have the largest, cheapest, best grow we can, the market really needs to understand why that'll happen over time. And I would say most of my conversations with distributors and suppliers, there's always going to be regionalized, localized, like wine. You're going to have your California varietal, you're going to have your BC bud, you're going to have that. But that exists primarily at the recreational market, where people are really specifically to these other things. As a consumer products company, as a medical company, as things that we looked at, our more important factors are on our consistency, on having accurate dosing, to have accurate production and the highest quality GMP standards, or EU GMP in the case of our facility in Cosechemos, to make sure we're delivering on that brand promise again and again. We're not a varietal. We're not a wine company. We're not a craft brew company. We're producing pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, phytoceuticals, all the different products consistently well for a global market.
Correct. And that ties very well with my follow-up question to Dr. Annabelle. Clearly, any company can claim and can grow cannabis at a very low cost, but in order to grow it in a medical or pharma grade, you need to follow a very robust set of standards. And the market is highly regulated. As an expert in the industry, Dr. Annabelle, having consulted for multiple countries, you clearly have insight into what's happening in terms of the regulatory environment. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion, especially this week, with regards to changes in the landscape, especially in the United States. Can you share with us and our investors, Dr. Annabelle, your thoughts on the regulatory environment and the steps that countries like the United States are taking towards federalization and legalization?
Sure. I mean, I think, not to be overly opinionated, of course, my interest is really just, I hope that we can do good science, right? And have the ability to do that. And just touching on, everything Jason's been talking about. I mean, the consistency and transparency portion is that is a huge gap in the cannabis industry, believe it or not. I mean, a lot of my colleagues have been testing these products, and they just don't have what they say they have in them, right? And it's so unfortunate, because there are a lot of people that want to use cannabis for medicinal reasons and for wellness reasons, to really start supplementing their body. And wellness is such a big part of today, right? So just getting back to that, I mean, that alone is something that is not very easy to put together, and we haven't been forced to as an industry. And so everyone just jumped and rushed to get things done, and let's put a huge shiny manufacturer. I mean, I've seen all kinds, right? But where's the substance? And like Jason said, a lot of those companies are now way under or don't exist. And I'm thankful for that, because, I want to see good products, because this has done so much for my son and so many other people. I want to start seeing the innovation of the medical and the scientific side actually come to fruition. And so with all this legislative talk, I mean, news is news, and no one tries to get too excited over them or get upset in the end, or whatever you want to call it. But I've been a part of building comprehensive packages for different states and ensuring that different regulatory standards on the medical and scientific side. I mean, what does that mean, right? What does scientific rigor mean? What kind of facilities should we have? What are the outcomes and the outputs of these products that we need to show? Just making sure that those things are within these packages. And I think very similarly, that's the package that we're going to be looking at the federal level. And so as Flora, it's just been really important to say, hey, let's do things right now, so that we're not biting ourselves later for not ensuring that we take the right steps, that, you know, it really is very close to a pharmaceutical lifestyle, right? When it comes to facilities, when it comes to SOPs, and it comes to all the number of standards that you find in creating and manufacturing good products. So, you know, my personal take on it is not to, you know, get overly excited about it, but I just hope that scientifically we can start doing work at these various universities that I personally have relationships with, that are just waiting, really, you know, well, wow, I'd love to help you back up your son's story and the stories of many others who, you know, took RSO and are cured of cancer now. I mean, we need good scientists, and we need good medical doctors to come on board, and they're so tied to the laws that restrict them from being able to do this research. So, you know, with whatever talk is out there in the media, I just really hope that we finally get a chance to take our cannabis, put some studies behind it here in the United States. And then I know Flora is going to do their due diligence and make sure that we create products based on those studies and based on that data.
Correct. So go ahead, Jason.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, and I think the two things that I think are important in the talk of legislation this week, there's two key points that I think are most key, which was the rescheduling, and Dr. Annabelle just made mention of that. There is not enough, the global standards from the World Health Organization have made comments that they should be looking at rescheduling. Cannabis today is regulated higher than cocaine. Essentially, it's treated as heroin or anything else. It's treated as no medicinal value from a global standpoint, which of course is ludicrous from these standpoints. I think most of the world has made these recommendations, but this is a 50-year-old plus law that was brought in and has kind of stagnated the science behind this. So whether or not this current legislation finalizes, the idea of rescheduling within the US will open a lot more opportunities from the medical standpoint and start to normalize that standpoint. The second key thing I think is important is the FDA coming into a more of an involvement role than they can't today. For our company like Flora, I mean, this is our wheelhouse. We operate in the food and cosmetics and all these other nutraceutical or wellness categories. We govern and run our businesses basically to an FDA standard to start. We're not a recreational brand who's looking to just get that varietal to market. We're already operating and building our facilities, or have our facilities, like our Flora Lab facilities, are already built to multiple licenses that, you know, meet or exceed all of these expectations in our GMP facilities today. Our revenue that's derived primarily, that, you know, we'll be very excited to share when we get to our earnings in, you know, coming up in the next few months, are all based on, you know, the massive growth we've had both in these categories, and all built to these standards that are coming in our direction. We're not kind of catching the market and waiting to change and, oh, look, the FDA is now involved. We've built the business out from the start. And as the world normalizes and we get to a new schedule for cannabis, and we get to an FDA-ish oversight model for even if it's just in wellness or even medical, we really feel that Flora is strategically positioned with a massive portfolio of products, from novel food to cosmetics, like I say, to all these different products that are already built to these standards. So I welcome those. Cannabis legislation is fraught with challenges, including the social aspect, kind of reversing the war on drugs and the expungement of records. And there's a lot of social change built into the fabric of legislation that is difficult. But I think the argument about efficacy and the rescheduling should be put aside. These are subjects that need to be just put to rest. And we as a society can debate how to unwind the negative impact of war on drugs. But it's really frustrating, because the science is there to at least move us forward to clinical trials, to testing, to universities. We're stalled though in this period of how do we expunge records, how do we do this, and they almost should be treated a little separately. No more soapbox, Luis, sorry.
Correct, Jason. But I think in terms of some of what you're sharing in terms of the complex regulatory environment, the few companies that are able to navigate these high barriers of entry are poised to benefit from a long-term economic growth that will come from this industry. We have a question on the chat from Bill Kirk. I'm going to ask this question to you, Jason, and allow Dr. Annabelle as well to add her comments. So on the U.S. proposal introduced by the Senate, it appears federally that imported cannabis would be allowed, but states could make their own determination to allow it. Is that your interpretation of the draft, Jason? And would you expect imports to be included in the bill's final passable form? And I'm going to make that a two-part question as well. I'm going to ask you what is the impact on the cannabis law that was introduced by the Senate yesterday? What would be the impact for a company such as Flora Growth?
So the first part of the question, technically import in the US is already allowable. So import in the US under certain things, there's not necessarily a flower import requirements, but you can import certain levels of isolate for research purposes and for medical products if they maintain certain standards. Every jurisdiction I've seen globally will have a nationalistic resistance to imports for certain categories of products. And again, I use the recreational varietal wine kind of analogy, if you will, that there will be some of those. And the German market today is trying to rapidly get into their position to produce localized producers for the EU. So there's always going to be a localized thing. But to Dr. Annabelle's point before, there is a medical wellness category coming. Once we have the ability to really translate these products into medical products efficiently and have the science to back it up, the localized aspect of that goes away. And for a company to have the lower cost production, the high quality production, rigor and control at the highest levels of standard from a medical standpoint, there is no barrier to entry anymore. That becomes like an Advil or something else. We're now talking about a totally different type of category of product, which I think no barrier. Again, that is really related to the larger question at the UN, which is on the actual schedule of cannabis as a Schedule I narcotic. To your second point, what does this mean for a company like Flora? Well, I think already Flora operates in the US. We have products and we're making sales, and we have a number of our products already in there, and we're looking to expand our distribution through both numerous channels. So today we're already open to the markets in totality. The key, I think, for us, and I think which is really intriguing, is if the FDA was to step in and govern this, the rigor of control goes up immensely, and all the companies that were operating on the margins. So there are thousands of beverages in the market today. Not all of them, and Dr. Annabelle hit it on the head. You could buy a 6-pack, and each bottle will have a different cannabinoid percentage. They're not consistent. There's no real efficacy in any of these products. A company like Flora's position is delivering on a brand promise from a consumer product across the board, like you would expect a Pepsi, right? If I drink one Pepsi, I want it to taste like the next Pepsi. If I'm in Nashville or if I'm in Miami, I want the product to be the same. And that's where Flora's opportunity even through our consumer divisions is really emphasized and brought forward, because we can meet these standards and are built to meet these standards. So our sales in the US today are already growing, dramatically month over month. And I think I encourage the FDA's involvement, because that would just eliminate, hopefully, a lot of the noise in the market today.
Completely agree, Jason. Dr. Annabelle, something to add?
Yeah, I mean, right on time, Jason. I see why we're on the same team for sure. But I've actually entertained that question of imports and exports, because I've led a lot of scientific experiments with many different countries, and you see the same thing, right? If you have the proper standards and however many percentage of THC and created and manufactured with these practices, I mean, it's like nothing else. It starts becoming in the category of, quality, good, transparency, and you bring it into study. Now, once legalization starts, kind of getting a little easier, and we're able to actually study and actually sell these products within the United States. I mean, I don't think people realize 97% of chemotherapies are made from plants, right? And these plants are imported from Ecuador, from Africa, from Asia, from all over the world. By the time it gets to us, they're powders, they're isolates, right? And so cannabis eventually on the medical side will become like no other, as long as it's created in the right conditions, as long as it's manufactured under the right quality control. It just becomes one of those pharmaceutical products that we're able to utilize and sell as long as we're meeting the proper protocols. So, you know, exactly on time with those comments, Jason. And I think for Flora, because we're focused on just doing things right from the get-go, opposed to waiting until those laws become implemented, and really anticipating just being able to do things with the right set of protocols. I think we're in for a win, you know, once we get the FDA involved.
Thank you, Dr. Annabelle. And I think that brings me to Jason's opening comments. I would our investors love to hear about our cultivation practices as well as our extraction facility. Clearly, that's where it all begins. That's where we have to be very rigorous in terms of standards, certifications. Can you provide our investors with an update with regards to both our cultivation and our extraction lab?
Absolutely. So, as I said, it's a funny thing, cannabis. It's not like a tomato. I mean, we have so many greenhouses around the world. There's so many production, and it's actually very temperamental, very, in some ways, challenging to grow. It requires these special things that Colombia kind of presents. So as I said earlier, the normalization of these products from a global standpoint, and Dr. Annabelle pointed out, opium, a lot of that comes from Australia. We don't realize that opiates and a huge amount of production comes overseas already in these things, just to echo that point before. So I see Colombia the same thing. We have this ideal conditions because of the equatorial growth. Cannabis at its opportunity needs, 12 hours of light, 12 hours of darkness. Greenhouses in northern climates where those are not the same, introduce artificial light, they introduce artificial darkness. There's ways that we are ideally set up with this growth. So just as in terms of an update, we're long into now completed on our commercial production or growth on all of our non-psychoactive cannabis products, so the high CBD strains. We have multiple strains that have been produced and we're testing now and bringing through all the protocols, both on the extraction process as well as the certifications, the microbials, and all the other testing that we would require. We're eagerly anticipating or waiting the laws to change in Colombia so that we can export this flower under the conditions as it stands today. We have our secondary, another audit from our GACP, which is Good Agriculture and Collection Processes, which is kind of the standard, which you need, the minimum standard, I think, that you should be required from a cannabis production standpoint. So we feel we're well on way, right on schedule with both our non-psychoactive and our psychoactive production. So psychoactive production will follow on here behind it. And we've been granted the opportunity, what they call a semi-commercial production run, which is we're producing or growing today, which is on our psychoactive or high THC yield cannabis at the facility. In conjunction with that, we are building our extraction facility to the highest what we would consider EU GMP, which allows us then to process and export that product to any medical market in the world. The EU GMP license takes a little time, but the ground has already been broken and we're already off and running with an expectation that we'll have our facility up and running by the September-October timeframe and looking to begin the first steps of that export process following behind that. The EU GMP is intriguing, I would say, though, and I think it's also clear why this is part of our global strategy. A partner like Hoshi and the things that we're trying to do from a global standpoint, you need a European partner to assist in your certification of your facilities. You can't just build it and they will come. You need to make sure that you're connecting the supply. Just like our export quotas, we need customers around the world to supply basically purchase orders to us that we can then gain quota and then we can do export. So strategically, when we're thinking about making investments, we're planning for years in advance that we can have a certification path that allows us the quickest path to market. There are very few EU GMP facilities in the world, in part because it's hard to get them certified because there's no partner on the other side that will provide the other end of the chain. So a lot of our planning and early steps we've taken was to get ahead of the comment before we're even up and running in Colombia. So I hope that provides the question for the investors. We're on pace, on schedule, and looking forward to the Q4.
Very exciting news, Jason. I think to put it all together, the fact that we are going to start generating some meaningful revenues out of our cultivation facility, that our extraction lab and that our licenses are all on time is a very reassuring comment from you leading that team. So thank you so much for that update. Okay, so I'm going to bring this fireside chat to a close. I'm going to give both Dr. Annabelle and Jason to make some final comments. My question to both of you is, and Dr. Annabelle, you'll go first, is why did you join Flora and what makes you hopeful about the future with our company? Dr. Annabelle.
I met Flora because of you, Luis, because of your charisma.
Thank you. You're too kind.
I will say, like I said, my son is 5, so I think it's fair to say I've been in this industry and learning a lot about different companies, about where we are as cannabis. Cannabis is a very different standalone industry, right? In regards to business, in regards to it all, right? So I've been very patient. I've been building my own brand. I've done TED Talks and I'm doing a Forbes book, and there's a lot of big plans in my future. And I've just been very patient, kind of waiting to see what platform and which partners I can do this science with, because it takes a team. And I realized that it would take longer, the same way Jason said, you're going into the EU, and how do you get to market faster with having the appropriate certifications? You partner. And so for me, when I met the different folks from Flora and I really started to listen to the vision, I said, well, wait, they actually do mean they want to do the science. They don't just want me to be on a poster saying I'm going to do science. They really do want to do science. They really are concerned with the quality control and the consistency of their products and making sure they deliver products that are backed by science. And not to say, oh, every single product you put on the market has to go through 50 clinical trials, but let's back it with some juice and with some data and really have a reasoning as to why we're making claims, right? So when Flora, introduced their vision, it was right. It was aligned with mine, and I feel better and better about it every day as I have different conversations with Luis and the rest of the team. That we are going to be the innovators in medical cannabis and providing specific products for specific conditions in both the medical and the wellness space. So that's why I'm with Flora, and I'm just so excited to be a part of this team going forward.
Dr. Annabelle, thank you for those words. I couldn't agree with you more. We are exceptionally honored to have you be a part of our team. Jason, I don't know how you follow that, but
I was going to say I can't. I plan to flatter you. Luis, also your charisma is what drew me in. Flora's VP of Business Development, which I'm sure the investors know, James Williams and I had worked for many years in the cannabis space, and from a capital markets perspective, from a global perspective, there was so many companies that followed the same playbook. Here's a deck with the largest grow in the world, and we're going to grow more than anyone else. And I was, again and again and again, they would go down this path. And, unfortunately, most of them are gone or never got off the ground, or they're sitting on multi-billion-dollar holes. I live in Alberta, and there's some significant facilities sitting dormant all around me here, which is really a shame because there was so much capital that was put on this. So when I met, so James introduced me to the Flora story, and the first thing they said was, yes, everyone knows that Colombia is going to have this powerhouse grow long term, but here's a company that really thought about the end goal, the brand goal, the consumer goal. And as someone who's worked in consumer marketing for most of my life, I was like, oh yeah, that's it. Because if I don't care about your product, you could have the cheapest grow in the world, but if I don't care, then I won't buy it. And that was really the first thing that I really started to latch onto. I think this is really indicative of the Tropi deal. I think it's really misunderstood that having a company that can produce upwards of $2 million a month in products that are entering distribution, that it may roll into these other categories, is significant. Like, so many cannabis companies built these massive facilities, and they were just, someday the market will work and we'll get product out, and it's just never happened. This is a company that was like, we need to be living where the customers are today. We need to be delivering products on a promise, on a consistency and a quality where they live. And oh, and by the way, we can eventually supplement this with the best product in the world to make it happen. And I just love that story from the first day. And I think, you know, from my experience in the cannabis industry, it was unique. And I really firmly believe that we'll be able to deliver on that message, which is very significant. As I said, I don't know any other cannabis company that could turn around a $2 million per month deal in the Whole Foods division immediately based on the quality, the assurance, and the ability for that company to deliver. And that speaks to the volume of what's to come.
Jason, well, you did a great job.
I fit okay.
That was a great job. So once again, we want to thank our investors for joining our Fireside Chats. We have a commitment, of course, to transparency and to keep our investor community involved. Of course, the Flora story is a different one in that we have made it a pivotal part of our strategy to ensure that we have the best team in the industry. And clearly, if you were able to listen to both Dr. Annabelle and Jason today, you can see why we're building a top-class team that is going to rival any of those in the industry on a global scale. So I'm going to close the Fireside Chat by giving you the next update. We're going to have our earnings call on August 19th. That is an important day that I want you to mark your calendars and prepare for. We're very excited about the opportunity to communicate with you from a financial standpoint, as well as our plans for the future. So please mark your calendars and look forward to all the amazing news that we're going to continue to share with you on our press releases and our commitment to keeping you informed about all the great things we're doing in the company. So with that, I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday, and we'll talk soon. Thank you, everyone.